AC Milan's decision to part ways with manager Vincenzo Montella is just the latest sign that the club is ailing.
Objectively, we are finding our identity beyond the results.
And there's no question that the club are in an identity crisis, both on and off the pitch. Once upon a time, AC Milan ruled all. The late 80s to the mid-2000s was a glittering era for one of Europe's greatest ever clubs. The Rossoneri won 3 European Cups and 6 league titles. They had players like Ruud Gullit, Marco van Basten and Paolo Maldini, plus top managers like Arrigo Sacchi and Carlo Ancelotti. But every cycle comes to an end. The club has been in serious decline in the last decade, with the last major titles being a 2007 Champions League win and a Serie A crown in the 2010-11 season. Then in 2015, previous owner Silvio Berlusconi decided to sell the club after 30 years. The former Italian Prime Minister completed the sale after a 2-year saga to new Chinese owner Li Yonghong in August for $828 million. The hope was that an injection of massive foreign money would help turn things around. Only it hasn't. Milan have been losing millions at a tremendous rate, which hasn't been helped by a $270 million spending spree on 12 new signings this summer. And as a result, UEFA are now investigating the club and leaves financial resources in line with their financial fair play rules. A breach of rules which could leave the Rossoneri out of European competition for a time and slapped with possible fines. To make matters worse, Lee needs to pay back a high-interest loan, close to $350 million to the company which helped him buy Milan in the first place, Elliott Management. If he fails to pay up, they could take over. So with the Chinese ownership as deep in a financial hole as it is, Lee could be forced to sell the club much sooner and for much less than he ever expected. But it's not just AC Milan who should be massively worried. City rivals Inter have also recently come under new foreign ownership, as have numerous clubs across Europe. But AC Milan may be case in point that money won't solve the problems.
So they haven't won a Serie A title in 6 years or a European title in 10. And now it looks like AC Milan's problems are getting deeper. Well, hopefully, David Schiavone can shed some light on the situation. David, thank you very much for coming on to Beyond the Game. Now, AC Milan are 7th in the table. They're 18 points behind Napoli now. Agreed, Gattuso is a club legend, but is he really the solution right now?
That is a difficult question. I don't know if anybody would be the solution right now. The team have looked lacklustre. They don't look like they know what they're doing on the pitch, or they didn't under Montella. And there's question marks of whether Gattuso is the guy that can give them the direction on the pitch that they need. Today in his press conference, he was asked about his managerial style. Is he all heart and fight and grit? And he responded with that he studied for his coaching badges like everybody else, so he's not just about that. But his managerial career before this has more or less been categorised by his heart, grit and determination. I think it could maybe work in the short term, but as a long-term appointment, I think Milan probably needs somebody with a bit more experience and a bit more tactical nous if they're going to get themselves out of the hole that they're in.
I suspect he just wants a little bit more respect now that he's in the big seat. But this was supposed to be AC Milan's sign of revival. I mean, they spent big in the summer. You've got to ask, is it all worth it? Because now they could face sanctions from UEFA over financial fair play rules.
Yeah, well, I think you're right in that it's not going to be worth it, because they spent an obscene amount of money in the summer, bought essentially a whole new team, and none of the players that they've really bought have performed, maybe apart from Fabio Borini, and he's a loan signing from Sunderland, and the likes of Bonucci, who was essentially their star signing. He is the shadow of the player that he was at Juventus. And the thing is with all these transfers and with that massive outlay, that was all kind of based on Champions League qualification. That was the end goal: get into the Champions League, get that Champions League money, and then they can go forward from there. But it looks like, or it looks very likely, that they're not going to get into the Champions League next season, which kind of almost rips apart the plan that they did have. So there could be another kind of summer of turmoil at the San Siro for them if that's the case.
Well, let's have a look at matters off the pitch. Was the sale worth it? I mean, you heard from the package it took around 2 years for it to go through, but look at the trouble that they're in now off the field. Is it worth it?
I think it's worth it in terms of they've been able to buy players, because the problem before Milan were taken over was that Berlusconi and Galliani, who were in charge then, weren't spending any money. They were basically running the club on free transfers or really, really cheap signings, primarily from Genoa, and that was basically the way the club was going forward for the last kind of 4 or 5 years. And with this new injection of money, it kind of gave a lot of people hope that, right, this is the way forward. But they've been able to spend big on players, 40 million, 30 million, 20, 25, which they hadn't been able to do before. So I think in that sense, it's definitely beneficial for them. But the problem is the players that they're buying, are they really as good as the players that they were getting before? Maybe a little bit, but not too much, as has been shown this season. At this point last year, for example, they had 29 points after 14 games. This season, they've only got 20. So you would say, kind of statistically, it isn't worth it. But I think the fans are more hopeful of going somewhere in the future because they've been able to make signings, whereas before they weren't able to do that.
Well, as we heard from the report, the Chinese owner, Li Yonghong, borrowed around $350 million, and that has to be paid back next October. Now, is it a case of, the club going through another sale? And if that is the case, who's going to be interested in buying a club that's heavily in debt?
That is a very interesting question. It would have to be another foreign owner. I don't think there's anybody in Italy who has the amount of money or would want to spend the amount of money on a club, because not only would they need to buy the club, they would also need to reinvest as well. There's also a lot of speculation about whether or not the players that they did buy this summer will still be there. There could also be a fire sale which could be used to pay off some of the debts as well. So you could see some of these players that have came in, likes of Bonucci or Franchesi or Kalinic, who they spent big money on, leaving after 1 year because the club need to try and balance the books to the best of their ability.
All right, David, thank you very much for coming on to Beyond the Game. We'll speak to you soon.